watch, PWBA Tour, sport bowling versus house bowling.
I'm just going to let you guys listen to this for a minute. This is Mike Flanagan and Ron Hicklin.
Myself included, probably. But the more I started
talking about the rules,
involved in being able to host the show today, I started kind of taking an interest in this quite a bit. And I think you and myself are going to learn
while I get ready
throughout today's show. So we're glad you're with us here today. It's not just me here today, though. We do also have a USBC representative. I like to call him my friend. We worked together on Bowl TV so many times, and he's here to shed some light on the information as well. So let's bring in Jason Thomas, who is at USBC headquarters. Hello, JT. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the country.
It's morning. USBC representative. That's my. It makes it real when you say it like that. But yeah. This is a cool topic. I've been watching Ron's videos. I was aware that he was here to do some testing, and I was really looking forward to seeing the information come out. So we're going to get to have a first look at it today. I can't wait.
Yeah, he has what he's put together a video that we got late yesterday, and that was on purpose. He didn't want us to see the video any time more so than to get immediate reaction to it. And by the way, everybody, this video that we will be showing and premiering throughout the show will be available on Ron Hicklin Jr. YouTube channel immediately after the show, so you can go back and take a look at it. But one thing I wanted to ask you, JT, before we get too much into the show and we bring Ron in, is did USBC solicit Ron to come and handle this topic, broach the topic, or did?
So I haven't heard this before, so I'm kind of just going to give you some live questions, or if I have a comment or something, I'll let you know. This thing is about an hour long, but I don't know if we'll get through the whole thing. But I just wanted to listen to it and maybe kind of make some comment of my own, or have questions as we listen to it as well.
Ron, approach you.
No, it was the second. Ron, obviously, he's one of my favorite people. Whenever I run into him, I would spend an hour, half hour,
it's kind of like a podcast,
2 hours longer than I expected talking to him, because there's so many interesting topics that we have to talk about. And so, yeah, he was just curious based on everything that had been going on in the industry, wanted to conduct his own tests at the place where, all the certifications happen, and asked if he could come out and do it. And we were happy to allow him to come out and do it and film it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it is that he found, because he's, one of the best minds in the sport, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I just wanted to just make sure, obviously USBC has taken a bit of a public bashing in some camps regarding all of the things that have happened over the last couple of years. And I just wanted to see if this was something that you guys had asked Ron to do, or if this was something that he just wanted to do himself. So that's cool to hear that he just wanted to do it himself. That's awesome. And I'm looking forward to the findings. But before we get too far along, I do have a note here. Your team there at USBC and myself, we have teamed up moving forward to do more sport of bowling shows. And we're pretty much going to be bringing these shows back every single week with interesting topics and things to talk about in bowling. Every other Tuesday, provided there aren't big events going on where we can't do the show. And we have a lot of events, but we're planning on doing this every other Tuesday, right?
Yeah, that's right. And even when we do have big events going on, we may do the show from wherever that big event is happening. So I'm looking forward to that. This is a great show. It's a great sport. And like you said, we're going to cover just about every topic that you could imagine in the sport of bowling. And that's why it's called the Sport of Bowling Show.
Yeah. And in the comments, as you're watching this video, as it gets distributed, or we're live right now on YouTube and on Bowl TV, if you have any ideas for the show, we'd love to hear them as well. Okay, so JT, anything that you want to say before we introduce our guest here?
No, let's get to it. I want to see what a 30 hardness ball does when you throw it down the lane.
Okay, so let's introduce, let's bring him in. Bring in Ron Hicklin Jr., the CEO and founder of Creating the Difference.
What's going on, guys? How are you this morning?
Ron, it's awesome to have you here, man.
Thank you for having me here, man. I'm pretty excited. This is a good time.
Yeah, and you are, I mean, look at that set you have there. You are at the Creating the Difference Education Center in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Boy, that's awesome. You got that place there to be able to do your own testing and checking out? What goes on there at the facility?
Yeah, so we do a lot of education, coaching, and training here. We've got 4 lanes. We got 2 different surfaces, which is kind of unique. And we do a lot of pro shop training, bowler training, any sort of training and education revolved around bowling we can do here. We've got Specto, we've got all the cool toys, Specto, Clutch, Torch, you name it, we've kind of got it, except we didn't have a robot. We have no robot. So that was one of the benefits of going down to USBC. But got a lot of tools here, some technology that other people have, some technology other people don't have. So that's one of the things that we do here too, is some development of new products too. So definitely a blessing to be able to get this facility, especially because I was here when that facility was actually purchased by Ebonite International around 2010. And we use it primarily for education and testing down here.
So you do your own testing there constantly?
Yeah, a lot of product development happens here. A lot of product development.
Okay, cool. JT and Ron, to the audience at home, they've got lanes every day when they go to work, and we the audience don't. So I think we're all a little bit jealous of both of you, JT.
Well, that reminded me when Ron said we have a robot of Jurassic Park, when John Hammond said we have a T-Rex. We have a robot. Yes. Yeah,
and we'll see that throughout the video here today. So Ron, obviously, I've got a list here of accomplishments and things that you've done. You've had a TED Talk regarding bowling ball engineering, and you've held so many different great roles. But the thing that just comes to me, and we talked about it before the show when we got in here, is you are just passionate about bowling, but more so you're on the nerdier side of things. You told me that you purchased a ball spinner when you were 14 years old, and you were resurfacing and working on your own bowling balls at the age of 14. So why are you so passionate about the spec side of things, and why we bowl well or bad with products?
Well, the whole thing kind of started with my father, right? My dad was toting me around from bowling center to bowling center ever since I was like 2 or 3 years old. And I think just the curiosity for me personally, trying to understand the why of everything, right? But specifically, I really wanted to understand a lot more about bowling. It's always fascinated me. I was lucky enough to meet the late Mo Pennell at a very early age, and he sparked a lot of that curiosity, and that really kind of drove me to end up designing bowling balls, to be honest with you. But I think, inherently, my character is trying to understand things, right? If you can understand things, that just helps all the way around. It help you to improve things, help you to know when to back off, So I just think the inherent character of being able to say, well, let's try to understand these things. And bowling, as simple as it seems on the surface, is incredibly difficult. And that was one of the things that we learned just by going down to USBC.
Yeah, and JT, when Ron came over to the campus and was doing his testing, I'm sure you saw Ron's passion for this as well.
Yeah, I actually didn't see Ron when we were down here, but I mean, there are so many questions. Like, after I understood that he had come down and done this, we had talked on the phone a couple times, and there were just so many, practical applications to the testing that he did. I'm curious about, like, for example, I'm about to turn 50. So if I were to go out on the PBA 50 tour and I could use a 30 hardness ball, could I keep up with Chris Barnes? Right. I mean, just those kinds of questions are so fascinating to me. And I'm looking forward to seeing in the video what it is that he learned.
Yeah. So let's just make sure that our audience understands exactly what happened here. Is Ron, you went down there, you were there for 2 days of doing testing and things that you wanted to explore, and you've put together a video that's going to debut on your YouTube channel, as I mentioned at the top of the show. But we're gonna take parts of that video, and we're going to cover each one of those topics throughout. I guess the question I have for you is, why did you want to go down to USBC and do this? Because I'm sure it was costly, and I'm sure you have a lot of other things going on with creating the difference.
I mean, the truth is, there's just not a lot of information that's available, right? Like we Googled, searched, bowling ball hardness and looked for more information. There's just not a lot of information available. And, the funny thing is, people kind of know Creating the Difference as a bowling ball cleaner company or sanding patch, those kind of things. But honestly, Creating the Difference is an education company. That is what we do. So this was an opportunity for us to learn, as well as being able to use some technology that we just don't have access to. So it was very eye-opening, educational. The only bad part is, you got 10 minutes of video, right? We got 10 minutes of video here, and we spent 2 days there. So, we tried to cram as much as we could, but at the end of the day, it's a good start. It's a good start.
Okay, well, I think it's time that we start diving into the meat and the potatoes of why we're here today.
Thank you.
So JT, I believe you have a clip queued up for us. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first part of this awesome video that Ron's put
You
together.
guys can't see this, but if you go watch his video, you can.
The rules of bowling.
I haven't seen this yet, though.
Why do they exist? What happens when a bowling ball is approved, and does it even matter? That's really what we wanted to go find out. So we went to the United States Bowling Congress, which is the governing body of bowling, and we asked them if we could do some testing at their location. They were like, sure, you can use our facility and our technology, but here is the deal. You come up with the test, and you can perform the test. So we said, all right, let's do it. We had some custom bowling balls manufactured specifically to test the rules of bowling. We came down to Arlington, Texas. We spent 2 days doing testing, using their technology and shooting content to try to understand, why do we have rules, and what does the approval process for a bowling ball look like, and what does it really mean? What would happen if we didn't have rules? What makes a bowling ball illegal? And is there really an advantage to illegal bowling balls? Well, can't wait to show you what we found out.
Okay, so there's
That's where we're stopping?
teaser there that gets everybody kind of ready for this thing. So
I wonder why this is an hour long.
What were you hoping to learn in conducting your own independent research? Being a third party, being able to come in and use the equipment.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was just really trying to get some more information and data on hardness and its impact in the sport. We had did a video, at our facility with the best that we could do, right? But that video left some more questions. So it was like, well, really, there is some other technology that's available. Plus, we should really go get some specialty balls made and really try to, understand even more about this topic. It's funny because, I designed bowling balls for roughly 15 years, and we never really focused on hardness. And then all of a sudden, it becomes this massive deal within the whole industry. And I'm like, man, to think about that, we never focused on that ever. And I was in charge of that stuff. So like, if it was going to be a focus, it would have been in my department. But to never focus on it, and then to see it create all these issues and all these things within the industry, it was like, well, maybe we should do a little research. So we were, lucky enough to be able to get some balls made, and lucky enough to be able to go down to USBC and use their facility.
So let's talk about those bowling balls, because that was one of the questions I had after being able to view this video. I don't think you own a bowling ball manufacturing facility, do you, Ron?
No, we don't. No.
Where did you get these bowling balls? How do we know these bowling balls are credible from your studies?
Well, what I can tell you is that we actually had a USBC approved manufacturer make the bowling balls for us, and they were expensive. I can tell you, you would know that, a bowling ball probably cost about $200, maybe $250 drilled all in. These balls were $400 a piece, and that was before they got holes put in.
Well, thank you, Ron, for spending that money for the rest of us to be able to do his research. So support creating the difference, everyone, to help Ron out on recouping some fees on these balls. So that's good to hear that they're credible bowling balls. That was a question I had when I watched the video. So when you went there and you were going to do all this testing, why did you focus on hardness? Was it because you were kind of shocked at all the things that happened, and as you mentioned, you really didn't focus on it when you were designing bowling balls, other than making sure it was in spec, of course?
Yeah, hardness has been just a topic, right? It's been a very important topic. So I actually had a bunch of different bowling balls made, not just hardness. We did some differentials testing and some RG testing stuff as well. But I wanted to focus on hardness because that was topic that, to be quite honest with you, I probably knew the least about of all of the metrics. and wanted to have a better understanding and thought, well, if we're going to collect the information, why don't we do it in a way that's as scientific as we can and then just share it? Like I said, we're an education company. So for us, it's all about trying to share the information that we gain.
Okay, so I think we have the why, and the video then goes on to continue on to explain your findings. So I think this is a good time to queue up our next portion of the video.
So we wanted to look at the rules that exist in the sport of bowling and have a better understanding of how the USBC conducts those tests. So we asked them to go through the testing and approval process for a bowling ball while we filmed it. What is interesting is that the process takes about 5 hours per ball and is intense, repetitive. Some parts are just plain boring, and honestly, it's all highly necessary to create reliable results. There are some aspects of the bowling ball testing procedure that you may be familiar with. COR, or coefficient of restitution, the coefficient of friction, radius of gyration, differential, mass bias, surface roughness, oil absorption. There are also specs on the roundness of a bowling ball, as well as the size. These make sense in general because look at how easy it was to strike with an oversized ball. It's also important to note that without these specs in place, it would be extremely difficult to have a fair playing environment or have equipment that could return the bowling ball automatically. Ironically, the ball that has been the main reason why we started asking questions in the first place doesn't hook the most and doesn't absorb oil. What we really wanted to gain the most understanding about was the hardness of a bowling ball.
I wonder why. I'm just bored, John. That's all.
So taking a look at that, I think the first thing that catches all of our eye is you.
Mike, you're no longer invited.
You
cannot come out anymore.
Appears to be, like a duck pin ball. Are those balls? Do they use those there in testing? How'd you acquire those things?
So it's funny you mentioned that, right? So those balls just happened to be there. That was not initially part of the test.
I know this is boring. I'm just trying to get through it because I haven't watched it yet.
Throw some of these other balls you have here, and at first they kind of looked at us like, well, why would you want to do that? But then they were like, well, sure, go ahead, whatever you want to do. So it was kind of funny. I will tell you, the oversized ball was 23 pounds, and though you would think that would be very easy, it has a handle, right? If you look at it's kind of funny. When you watch the video, it has a handle and a thumb hole. So the first couple times, I grabbed the handle and put my thumb in the ball, and I went straight up in the air. So we learned to take the thumb out of the ball, and then you would think that'd be pretty easy to hit the pocket, but it actually wasn't because that much weight it pulls you. So it took a little while to get that shot that we ended up showing.
You didn't do it in one take, huh?
No, that definitely was not one take. But once we hit it was hard to get to the pocket. Once we hit the pocket, then obviously it was like, hit the head pin and you're going to get 10. So,
yeah, the other thing in there, and obviously you sent balls off to get approved, for many years in your experience. 5 hours per bowling ball?
Per ball.
Did that shock you?
Yeah, because think about that for 1 second, right? So the approval process isn't one ball. It starts off as 2 balls. And depending on the specs and how the bowling ball ends up, they've got some limits, right, that they look for. So if you get close to a limit, they want more balls. It could be as many as 57 balls. So for approval for one product. So when I realized how intense the process was, which we were not allowed to be anywhere near that when I worked for the ball manufacturer. But when I found out how intense it was, I was like, this is more than a full-time job. Because think about how many balls are released a year.
Yeah. Are you shocked that you didn't have more issues with the bowling balls that you designed over the years after seeing the process?
So it was kind of interesting. There were some things that you get kind of used to and you begin to know, right? So one of the big things regarding the hardness was that USBC would share the data that they got from hardness back to the manufacturer. So we knew what they, we checked the balls when I was at the manufacturer, then we sent them to them and then they checked it. So we knew we knew that there was a difference, but we knew what that difference was. So because of that, we could always make sure that, the balls were good. And that's also an interesting point, because when I was the manufacturer, we never made bowling balls that were at the spec for that exact reason, because there's difference. There's always going to be some difference there. So you need to have some cushion there in case, there is a little bit of difference.
Yeah, we've seen over the years from multiple manufacturers, when you flirt with that borderline, right? We saw it with a core several years ago with one of the manufacturers.
Like, I don't have any questions yet because we haven't gotten anything important yet. So we're halfway through this and I got nothing. I mean, I guess they're just kind of explaining the whole process and everything, which is fine. But I do want to know how they came up with the idea that the softer the ball gets as it's being used, it doesn't affect reaction at all.
We've seen it with hardness now with a couple of manufacturers. And actually, when you go through that, I'm not going to mention the names, every manufacturer has had an issue in the last 3 to 5 years from what I've paid attention to. I try to stay on the media side of things and let guys like you or the USBC rules department, spec area down there handle all that kind of stuff, because I am, just like the audience, I'm very novice to this. But yeah, you probably don't want to flirt with those things, because, and I guess this is the question I would ask you, you've got bowling ball plants in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. I would imagine humidity, where they're made, all those sorts of things also come into play. Just like when we bowl, like the approaches, if it's humid in there, it's tough to slide, right? You got to pull out different slides. So I would imagine that the testing in Arlington, Texas, as opposed to, Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where you were, or Brigham City, Utah, or Mexico, or up in Michigan right now, those different places could also play in. Did you do any testing on that, or what are your thoughts on that?
So we tested all the balls at our facility in Hopkinsville, right, before we sent them down, and then had them tested at USBC. And of course, I mean, there was some difference there, and that's how it is. But what's so interesting is, the rules are pretty clear on this too, right? The rules are very clear on this, actually. USBC has a very rigid process, and their durometer is the official durometer. So we tested bowling balls here in Hopkinsville, and they say one thing, but that really doesn't matter, because the rules say it's the USBC's durometer in Arlington, Texas. That's the one that matters. So you've got to make sure that you follow those rules. And we were able to see some differences that we would expect, and it's good to know that, though, because it allows you to then, if I was a manufacturer, allow you to calibrate your durometer to what they're doing now. And the rule, and it is fairly consistent, meaning that once you kind of figure out what the difference is, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, so you get to observe the entire process. Was there anything that's not in the video that you saw that made you go, wow, other than the length of the process?
Yeah, we saw a machine that they use there. We talk about it in the video, but we don't show the machine. The machine that they use to check some of their tools, it's a $100,000 plus machine, and it was very impressive. We didn't feel like there's a bunch of things that we just couldn't put in the video, right? So we didn't put it in the video. We do talk about it, but that was very impressive because it's a piece of technology.
Which doesn't make sense to me. Like, what can you hide? Like, why can't you show the machines and stuff? Like, what is it that USBC said? No, I don't want you to put this in the video. You don't talk about this. Don't talk about, like, why can't people see it? What would there be that you could possibly hide that could affect anything? I don't know. Just something that popped into my head immediately as soon as he said that.
That they have that I have not seen anywhere else.
Okay. Yeah, because I think the thing that a lot of us question when you have an issue is the testing accurate? Was there an error that day? Why did this happen? But from what you observed those 2 days, you believe that everything happening in that facility is 100% accurate with the tools and the things that you found and saw?
Yeah, I think the tools that they have, the tools are the tools, right? So we can argue all day long if we think the durometer is the right tool. What I will tell you is from what I saw there specifically is they have checks in place to help to validate what they're doing. And I saw I saw point blank the checks that they have in place. And there are things that, as an engineer, you would expect to see that. And there were some things that I saw as an engineer that were surprising in terms of some of the checks that they have in place.
And folks,
I know as a manufacturer, we didn't have some of those tools.
okay. And folks, from a credibility standpoint, I didn't mention this on the open because I don't like to read over resumes, but Ron does have a degree from Purdue University in mechanical engineering. So I consider you an expert at this. Okay. So I think that's enough on the testing process there. Thank you for sharing that with us and answering my questions on that. I know some of them are a little tough, but let's go into the next part of the video and see what else we can learn here.
The durometer is the tool used in bowling to measure hardness, and this tool has been used for decades without much fanfare. Hardness, however, has been a multi-million-dollar emotional roller coaster for the entire industry during 2022. People on all sides have voiced their opinion on what they felt about hardness. Some stated that the hardness of a bowling ball plays a role in performance and gives a player an unfair advantage. Others said that the durometer is the problem when trying to measure hardness and that it should not be used at all. But there just isn't a lot of information available out there that's relevant to this topic. We actually made a video that talked about hardness, and it shed some light on this topic. It also raised some new questions that we wanted to answer with some better technology and using a more scientific approach. We aren't so focused on the durometer this time because it is the official tool that is used in bowling, and debating it would be pointless in relation to our goal. Instead, we wanted to focus on the performance impacts and potential advantages of hardness measurements. We have questions like, what does softening a bowling ball do to the performance? Is there an unfair advantage to having an illegally softer bowling ball? Does 1 point of hardness difference matter in relation to performance? Can we measure a performance change with such a slight difference in hardness? The lower limit specification for hardness in the sport of bowling for a bowling ball is 73 D. This change was made and went into effect on January 1st, 2022. The old spec was 72 D.
Okay, so from that segment, I'm just gonna ask you. You know, we see the shot where a softer ball, you can miss a couple boards to the right and hit the strike pocket. From my understanding, does a ball that's harder, if you miss 2 boards left, does it then slide and hit the strike pocket still? So does it bounce out, or what does that do?
Yeah, so it's funny, right? It doesn't. There's 2 things that you get. So first off, if you go to line up with the harder ball, you got to move, right? So you got to change your angle, and it's the angle that matters. So once you line up with the harder ball and you miss in, you don't get the slow down effect. In fact, the ball kind of maintains the speed, so you end up going right through the face, which is what typically happens when you bowl on harder patterns anyway, right? I mean, that's what happens. The problem with the harder pattern is if you miss to the right, there's no help to get the ball to recover, and if you miss in, there's no hold to get the ball to go straighter. So once you go to a harder ball and you try to line it up, you don't have the miss left or right. You have neither one.
So, but you found that a softer ball, by how many numbers, did create more free hook to the right or more margin of error down lane, or what was it that you found with the softer ball?
Yeah, so it's 2 things, right? And I can explain why. So essentially what happens is what the softer ball does is it naturally allows the ball to want to slow down, okay? So if you think about the lane pattern, let's say we've got a 40-foot lane pattern, and let's say a normal hardness ball would slow down a mile an hour. Well, a softer ball, and depending on how soft it is, the more it is, but it may slow down 1.2 miles an hour or 1.5 miles an hour or 2 miles an hour. You say, well, how does that even matter? Well, the fact is, the more you can get the ball to slow down to a point, the easier you can create the pattern to be. Think of it this way. Think about when you're bowling league and the lanes are really what we call cliffed, right? Like you throw it and you throw it's a little fast and all of a sudden the ball goes right through the break point and the ball never recovers. If that ball would have slowed down a little bit, instead of you leaving a washout, maybe it's a light hit, right? So that's what ends up happening when you begin to use a softer ball. You can begin to take advantage of the fact that your ball.
So what he's saying by slows down, because I know some people would be confused by that, he's saying the ball slows down as in it does literally slow down because the ball's starting to change direction. So it's starting to create friction and see it on the lane more. So when he says slow down, just think of it that way.
Does slow down, because at the end of the day, if your ball doesn't slow down, it can't hook.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. The way I've always kind of had it explained to me, if your ball's coming in light, you're leaving 2-pin combinations. Being a right-hander, I know you're a left-hander, Ron. But if you're coming in and being light, right, you have options. You can move on the approach, or you can also soften your ball speed, which creates slower ball, right, which kind of shortens the pattern per se, which gives the ball more time to hook. And now you won't leave that 2-pin. You'll be more in the concentrated part of the pocket with optimum entry angle. So what you're saying is a softer ball also can help shorten the pattern, as I just explained, as it's been explained to me over the years from bowling coaches, right? Is that kind of the same?
Yeah. And here's the best part of this, though, Mike. So the thing of it is a house pattern has that slowing down effect built into it. It's called a taper. Mm-hmm. Whereas a sport pattern doesn't. And that's one of, not the only, but that's one of the big differences. When you don't have that taper, your ball is going full speed all the way to the end of the pattern. So it becomes a little bit trickier, right? That little bit of gas, little faster ball speed, all of a sudden shoots past the break point. Whereas if your ball would slow down via the lane pattern, house pattern, or in this case, softer ball by creating that slower, that slower speed, you get the benefit of it. So you can make a pattern that's very, very difficult a little bit easier. Now, to be fair, the other thing that's interesting is that this doesn't necessarily work on a house pattern because you already have the taper built in. You already have the slowing down effect built in. So the guy who goes, well, yeah, I'm going to go grab my purple whatever ball and I'm going to go throw it down the lane on my house pattern, you don't get to see the benefit. You just don't, because the impact, the benefit is already built into the pattern you're bowling on. But on tour.
Finally, there we go. So now somebody explains it. That's the way to explain it right there is you see the benefit of the pattern and you take that benefit of the pattern away with urethane. That's the thing. We got Sniper here. Is it true to increase rev rate, I don't need bent elbow on my Thursday league that you said you got to get the thumb out faster? A combination of both will help you. You don't have to have the bent elbow, but you do have to have the quicker thumb out. Your thumb has to get out faster in order to really be able to create the rev rate. If your thumb and your fingers are getting out at the same time, you can't create rev rate, right? So just think of it. If you're releasing all at the same time, it's going to be blah off your hand. It's going to be coming here, and it's just going to be off your hand, right? But if your thumb comes off, now your thumb is off, then your fingers can rotate. Now you can create rotation. That's mostly where rev rate comes. And then you can create technique by bending your elbow a little bit. That little bit of elbow bend helps you to get underneath it more and create a little bit more cup and create that snap off, the yo-yo effect. That's where that comes from. But no, you don't absolutely have to have the elbow bend, but to create optimum rev rate, the elbow bend does need to be there. But thank you for the question in the super chat. All right, back to this. So back to that. That's why urethane, and that's why people get upset about urethane during league, because it does take the oil out of the front, and if you're not wiping the ball off, it puts it down lane, kind of, in a way, more so than reactive does, because the urethane ball doesn't flare as much as the reactive ball. Most don't. Keep that in mind. So the urethane ball is just not going to give you the benefit on a house shot when that built-in friction to the right and the built-in hold is already there. You don't need the urethane to create that. So keep that in mind. Glad he said that.
At the highest level, different story.
Yeah, makes sense. I have so many questions right now, Ron. I want to talk about oil absorption and all these sorts of things, but we can't be here all day. I think we need to move on to the next part of the video here. This is very educational. I'm enjoying it.
An important note here is that the standard for hardness is measured by the USBC. So it doesn't matter what anyone else's durometer says when it talks about hardness. The rules are very clear on this. While watching the USBC do the testing, what was a surprise was the attention of detail they took not only in collecting the data, but in checking their own durometer. They have a very powerful digital microscope that can allow them to see the wear on the needle that does the testing. Monitoring this wear is important as this can potentially impact consistency and results. Seeing this technology firsthand showed me that they were doing their best to be as repeatable and as consistent as possible with collecting results.
We made sure that our custom balls were made with the same core, drilled with the same layout, had the exact same true cut surface, and we used the CTD surface scanner to monitor surface change during the testing. Because a bowling ball surface can change during bowling, and that can impact performance.
Note, USBC had no influence on our testing procedure or process and didn't know the results as the bowling balls were all coded except for the
Does it say 27?
hardness ball. That bowling ball happened to be green, whereas the rest of the balls were purple.
Nice.
We threw the balls 20 shots each in a random order. We had a consistent re-oiling process. We bowled on a 39-foot 3-to-1 ratio flatter test pattern. We found this best to show the results given the balls we had. To be fair, this was not a perfect test. We would have needed months of testing and tens of thousands of dollars worth of balls to get near perfect. And unfortunately, we just didn't have that much time. But we did get a whole lot of information that was far better than anything else we had seen available on this topic to date. So what did we learn?
That's crazy.
Our testing showed that hardness does play a role in performance. In all the different tests that we performed, that consistently stood out. Now notice I said played a role and not made a ball hook more. In certain situations, the total hook decreased with the softer ball. And one thing that was important was that the softer ball hooked earlier and slowed down more than the harder bowling ball.
So from those findings, I mean, the 27D ball is obviously the strobe light there. That's fun to watch. I mean, I couldn't imagine throwing 27D ball there. But you threw these different balls with the machine going over the Earl there is the robot's name, and you threw it the same speed, same everything, and then you could see in the video the difference between how much it hooks. So obviously hardness does make a huge difference, and you had the 27 in there to really show the huge difference that why we do have rules, right? I mean, because do you think a 27D ball would have a competitive advantage, or you think that's too soft, or that's the part that I really don't know much about.
So I'll tell you something interesting about that ball. We specifically had that ball made because we wanted to really push that limit. There's a lot of issues with the 27D ball that we don't even talk about in the video. One, drilling the ball. That ball didn't feel like a bowling ball. It felt more like a sponge. When we went to drill the bowling ball, it took us about an hour to drill the ball because we had to use different drill bit sizes. So when we wanted to get the thumb hole size in there, we had to use 6 different drill bits to get it to the right thumb hole size because it's so spongy. Started with a very small hole and then kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Once we got the ball drilled, there's all kinds of other issues still. Throwing the ball down the lane, that ball actually indents. Like it can indent. So it was one of those things where not only is it kind of cool to watch going down the lane, but there's all these other potential problems that you would run into. That bowling ball, believe it or not, did not absorb any oil, whereas our other bowling balls did. But what was really interesting was when you look at your bowling ball and you see the track lines around the bowling ball, and they're about like a 1/4 of an inch wide. They're kind of small, right? They're small. There's a bunch of them, right? Well, this one had 3/4 of an inch wide for one track because the ball compressed that much on the lane. Mm-hmm. So, it was very interesting to have that ball in play because it allowed us to kind of see, is there a benefit? And that ball isn't really usable. We've used that ball several times just to kind of see, could you put enough oil out there? Could we give it to our low rev rate guy? I've got a guy, we call him Billy Revs. And Billy Revs' rev rate's about 225, right? But that's what we call him, right? And I let him throw the ball, and he couldn't use it. And then I've got my other guy, Dustin, who's a former Team USA player, and his rev rate's 450, and he couldn't use it either. So like, there is a limit. And definitely you have to have some rules in place, and it creates all kinds of other issues as you begin to kind of go to the extremes.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. And again, everybody, if you're just tuning in, Ron's video is going to debut on YouTube here today, right after our show here. So make sure you check that out. Ron Hicklin Jr. YouTube channel. Very easy to find. A lot of great information over there. All right, let's cue up the next part of the video here as we continue on.
This becomes very important when you start to look for advantages that can be created. Our testing showed that the more your ball can slow down on an oil lane pattern, the greater the room for error or misroom that can be created. Our data also showed that a higher rev rate player could take greater advantage of that misroom created by the softness of a bowling ball. The softer the bowling ball is, the easier a flatter pattern can be to a point. If a ball gets too soft, it just becomes unusable. When you think of early hook, you may think of sanding your bowling ball. We found that sanding the ball does in fact make the ball hook earlier, but it also makes the ball lose axis rotation and tilt faster, which means that this ball will not continue hooking as much as it goes down the lane, and this is not desirable. The softer ball doesn't lose axis.
And that's why you use surface on a short pattern. You do that on purpose. That's why on those short patterns, when you're trying to play further right, you want it to lose its axis rotation faster. You want it to go straighter, and that's why you use a lot of surface and play straighter with it, so that way it loses its axis and you have less overall hook. Technically, it's not really less overall hook. It hooks earlier and loses its energy, loses its axis rotation. So that's the purpose of doing that. So for those of you that were wondering why everybody uses big surfaces or why the professionals use big surface bowling balls on the short patterns, that's exactly why, is because of that.
Rotation until it is fast, and as a result, the softer ball can continue hooking for a longer period of time. This is very advantageous when you are bowling on a flatter pattern, and you can miss to the outside part of the lane and watch your ball recover. Look at these two shots thrown by a 500 RPM bowler. They show that a two-board miss to the right can still recover and strike with an illegally soft bowling ball. If you've got two different rev rate players using soft bowling balls, the high rev rate player will see more room for error and more miss room for the bowling ball than the low rev rate player.
Think of a lefty like Jacob Buttriff, who has 500 RPM, versus a lefty like Parker Bone, who also uses a purple hammer. Not as successful right now. Was successful back in the day when the game was played differently. But in today's game, where Jacob Buttriff is creating all this room for error, that's exactly what he's talking about. Those softer bowling balls, even though technically they're legal or whatever you want to call them, whatever, that's where that comes into play. The higher rev rate creating more room for error and still having striking power, whereas a guy like Parker Bone, who does use a purple hammer, doesn't see nearly the success with it as what Jacob Buttriff does. And there's all kinds of different examples in that as well.
Having the hook in the right part of the lane is key to creating an advantage on a flatter pattern. House patterns have a taper or a lowering of the oil from the front to the back. This does help the ball slow down. And it's part of the reason.
Now, if you want to think of like a PBA pattern, literally flip that around, and that's kind of how it is. It's like you're bowling uphill. That's how bowling on PBA patterns are.
House
Some of
patterns
them
are easier than short or flatter patterns. Our data showed that there was a measurable performance.
Oh, I just said that as if you can see it. You can't see it. I don't know why I said. I'll show you guys later.
Difference in our 1 point difference test as well. Since some bowling balls tend to get softer over time with use, this does mean that they can potentially create an advantage for a player. Our testing has shown that hardness can create an advantage in bowling, and it can be measured as we have shown. We also think that we need rules in place to help regulate this and other components of the bowling ball. So simply put, the reason we have rules.
Yeah, and that's the massive wrist double joint. That's just how he creates rotation and rev rate. That's all. So yeah, I mean, creating that kind of rev rate because of that is difficult.
Create a fair playing environment for everyone and to protect the integrity of the sport. The rules should continue to evolve as more information and technology becomes available. Because in the end,
You want the best bowler to win based on their ability. I want to thank the USBC and their research team.
Well, very well put together, sir. Some of the information there at the end, obviously, I'd already kind of led the witness here, and we already kind of dove into some of that stuff. But man, just really well put together, and thank you for doing this video.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a lot of help. To be able to get that video done. Mikey Pinnell did a lot of actually did all of.
All right, I'm done with that. That's just boring now. I mean, you got the majority of the information you wanted there. But the cool thing about USBC is USBC is coming to Detroit for the Masters, and it filled in 10 hours. Like 10 hours. That's kind of crazy. And I know a lot of mad people right now that didn't get the opportunity to sign up. They didn't sign up in time, and they're missing out, so I'm not putting that on the screen. But they're going to miss out on this event. There's only 390 entries, so and it's already going to be a packed house. I mean, you got 5 on a lane or 5 on a pair. That's going to be pretty tight. With already a bowling center that doesn't have the biggest concourse, it's going to be real interesting how this all goes at the Masters this year, So, but hey, if those of you that haven't seen the new shirts, make sure to click that link in the description. Those shirts are available at those links. They're pretty sweet. I like them. And they're kind of funny, and I'm going to come out with some more so you'll be able to see these right here. Those right here. Check these out. You don't need urethane in league. I use urethane to piss you off. I got a I don't care what you think shirt. We've got a why do you take 30 seconds to just go up and throw the ball awful? And then there's you don't need 2-lane courtesy. Quit whining, bowl better. Like, I mean, there's some cool shirts on there now, and they're going to be a part of the brand that I'm calling Brutally Honest Bowling. So they'll be available. A lot of shirts have been ordered already, so appreciate everybody that's already ordered shirts and stuff. Somebody had to do it. Like, we all complain about these things, but we don't actually say much about it in person. So, yeah. Why do you take 30 seconds to bowl badly? Yeah. It's like you take like that, and that's so frustrating to me because there's people out on tour, or at regionals and stuff. Just sit there and you'll be literally standing and waiting for them. And you're looking out of the corner of your eye, and eventually, finally, you just look and it's like, are you gonna bowl? Move! What is wrong with you? What are you thinking about for that long? Some people, I tell you what, it drives me nuts. So that's my shirt. That's my favorite one, I think. Why do you take 30 seconds on the approach just to throw it awful? That's my kind of shirt. And then you don't need the league one, the perfect one. You don't need 2-lane courtesy. Oh, that shirt. A lot of those shirts ordered because people agree. You're in league. You don't need 2-lane courtesy. It's not needed. The PBA is different because in the PBA, they have the double jump rule. So you got to let somebody on that pair go, somebody on this pair go, then you go. And when it's done properly, it's actually quicker than 1-lane courtesy, or at least equal to 1-lane courtesy when people know what they're doing. So at national events, it just flies. People are just going. So it's going to be pretty sweet, or it is pretty sweet. Am I going to be at the pro shop during the Masters? Yeah, I probably will be in and out of it. When I'm not bowling, I'll probably be up there and stuff. Let me see how far my shop is to Thunder Bowl, and I will be able to tell you here in a couple of seconds. Let's go from Waterford Lanes to Thunder Bowl Lanes. It is exactly 50 minutes right now. So 39 miles. So yeah, less than an hour. And generally it's probably 10 minutes shorter than that because once you get on some of these highways, they're 55 miles an hour, but nobody does 55. Everybody does 80. So you just fly, you get right through them. If you go during traffic times, it sucks. So at 3 o'clock or later, or between 6 and 9 in the morning, those times kind of suck. But other than that, yeah, I'll probably be out there. So But anyway, I just want to chat a little bit and kind of go through that video because I've never seen it before. If you haven't seen it, go over to Ron Hicklin's video or Ron Hicklin's YouTube channel. You can see the whole video. I thought it was going to be a little bit more elaborate than that, but it wasn't, and that's okay. Kind of just gives you the information you need. So, but anyway, I'm going to get out of here. So if you guys have questions or anything, don't ask them unless you send me a super chat. I'm just being mean. I'm just being rude. The election stuff's got me in a mood. I was in a really bad mood yesterday. Not that anything was different than what I thought it was going to be, but it is what it is. We're not talking election stuff now. We're not doing it. We're not going to do it. All right. I was looking for something here. I can't find it. So I'm not going to put it up here then. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm out of here. We will see you guys next time.